Welcome. We're here with Cliff Allen, who's the Dean in the School of Business at Portland State University. Cliff was a creative driver behind our work at PSU. He encouraged us to do research and start learning about blockchain, and he was the one with the foresight to start creating a blockchain certificate program and the courses that we're now offering at PSU. Welcome, Dean Allen.
Thank you.
Cliff, can you tell us a little bit about your background before we get started?
Sure. Before I came to Portland State 10 years ago, I was in the high-tech sector, both in engineering and supply chain operations, mostly around B2B type businesses, but some consumer businesses as well. And then I came to Portland to join the business school at Portland State.
So given that background, it's not a surprise that you're interested in emerging technologies. So can you give us some history about how we've gotten to this point at PSU?
Sure. The blockchain idea came from a community member, an area that you may not think about a lot, and it was actually humanitarian aid. So the area where Mercy Corps and others play within blockchain, basically the people who don't have access to capital or actually are working in the field in a really high inflationary area like Venezuela, the currency is basically worthless. So having an alternative currency or having an alternative way to adequately get to finance was very important to them. And so they were really kind of a key driver behind why we looked at blockchain originally. And then it went into supply chain and some of the provenance areas that blockchain plays in.
Interesting. And so I know that recently you've taken some online courses on blockchain and fintech. And so I'm just curious, why have you personally invested so much time, and how do you think this is important for business professionals?
Well, I think it's really critical to the future of business to understand where the supply chains come from. How do the provenance work? Can we actually see knockoffs or trademark infringed products? Can we actually find out where the food came from? The Chipotle incident years ago where they had not one but two incidences with their lettuce supply. Certainly one of those could have been avoided if they were using blockchain. So that's critical to business. I also felt, similar to the Mercy Corps example, that my understanding is there's 1 billion people on the planet that have no ID. So how do we get those people the identification so that women can own property in several countries that they can't today? Public health records, just things like that. So you start thinking about it and it just becomes pervasive everywhere. That's one of the things that excites me about blockchain is because it is so established already in technology that it's really the apps now that will make it drive into the marketplace. And through those apps, I think we're seeing user cases pop up every day.
And then for students who are coming into school today or leaving school today, why do you think it's important for them to understand blockchain?
Well, some of the examples that I gave, I think are critical because if you're a supply chain analyst today, 5 years ago you didn't need to know analytics. Now you have to know everything about how do I data mine and visualize data. Blockchain is becoming the same thing. Having that traceability in supply chains, for instance, is important. There's 9,500 people at Boeing that work in supply chain alone. So they're going to have 3.1 million components that go in a Dreamliner jet. They have to know where they all came from. In today's marketplace in consumer electronics, nobody that's in the business that designs things actually builds things. So where does Apple find out where that bad component came from if they're actually not owning the supplier relationship? So blockchain enables us to do all those things, and so students have to know that today to be successful.
So Cliff, I've heard you talk about how important it is for business students to be in tune with emerging technologies such as analytics, data science, etc. So how do you believe that blockchain fits in with this particular line of reasoning?
I think that blockchain is the next wave, if you will, in business. I think that blockchain touches all vertical markets. It also touches nonprofit, and eventually I think we'll have a big responsibility towards blockchain use cases in education and public health. So our students need to know these things, and one of the things that's great about PSU is we have the flexibility to do these things for our students. And we're seeing it out in the field where more and more traditional finance areas such as banking want to play in blockchain because they see it as a threat. So understanding how these technologies work and how they can enable businesses to do better, I think, is why we need to do that.
And how would you say that PSU and the School of Business are you uniquely positioned to be offering these programs?
You know, we have a number of things that are unique to us. One is our location. So we're in the city, and being in the city, we have access to a number of partnerships that play into the blockchain space. So we have the financial community, we have the athletic and outdoor community that care about trademark infringement on their supply chains. We have a large food industry marketplace here. Fred Meyer's located here. So understanding how blockchain plays into all of those community partners is something that Portland State, being where we are, should play in. And so they're asking us to do it, by the way. So we're actually uniquely qualified because we are close to all those businesses in so many ways, including the university, you know, from the art school to the engineering school and then the business school. We have unique tentacles into those communities with all our alums, and so they naturally come to us when they want to problem solve something.
Yeah, we've noticed that in the blockchain community, all these startup founders and these people who are heading up blockchain in their own companies are really interested in getting engaged with students here and elsewhere, but they're willing to come talk to our students, be interviewed, participate in online discussion forums. So we're going to take advantage of all of that in this program.
That's great. That's great. You should.
So can you tell us a little bit more about why these partnerships are important to the program?
Well, I definitely think the use case piece. We're kind of building that community now, and being able to show both students and other community members that are maybe perhaps a little bit slower to adopt new technologies to where the use cases are is important. There's going to be businesses, as there always are, that are early adopters. But we're already seeing analytics is pervasive everywhere in the business community. It has been for 5 years. But then we're seeing companies that are in the insurance business or in the automotive business just starting to utilize analytics. And I see blockchain as the same thing, where in certain industries like food and retail, it's going to take off immediately. And then in other industries where, like in automotive, it may eventually take place when they go into different countries and try to market their products and find ways to analyze IoT devices along with, you know, information that they want to share. Maybe not even using cryptography, but using tokens, utility tokens to share information.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about specific partnerships that PSU has, like with the Venture Studio and things like that?
Sure. So we're a part of the Venture Studio that is organized around blockchain that has, we're an exclusive member for a university. And there are several members of that community, including Umpqua Bank, the state of Oregon itself, Smith & Crown, blockchain company, and a number of others. And the reason that's important is because that community sees the future of blockchain as being important, and again, going to the use case development piece, and have access to each other so that we can help develop coursework that eventually leads to future talent for them is really important. So being part of those consortiums is always where things start, if you will, building community, and then ultimately having it take off.
Mm-hmm. And PSU has kind of a unique mission, or the School of Business anyway, kind of a unique mission. So you can talk a little bit about that and how that might interact with the blockchain program that we offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, more and more of our students are come from diverse backgrounds, and that includes ethnicity, LGBTQ, veterans, or all those things. And so that kind of student tends to be more entrepreneurial, but it also tends to be first generation and may not have access to finance. So going back to our examples of having blockchain basically reach the unbanked, if you will, our students are in that community as well. So having them understand blockchain and how they can have access to finances, how they can go into developing countries and do good work, because our students like to do that kind of work as well. So yeah, our student really is kind of that community that's going to adopt these kinds of technologies for the future.
So Cliff, can you tell us a little bit more why you believe that PSU's program is uniquely different than what's currently available?
Well, I think that we're unique because we go deeper into blockchain than typical business blockchain type programs. They concentrate on strategy and the use case piece, which is hugely important. But we're going a little deeper, like how does blockchain truly work? How can it be implemented somewhere? And what does that code even just look like? And that's important because, especially in the world of smart contracts, understanding how smart contracts will play in what kind of areas, and then how should they be structured. Typical to just procurement contracts today that business people negotiate, smart contracts will be completely different. And so understanding how that code works and how those two relationships work between buyer and seller, really important. And it makes sense for Portland State to be involved because the people that are going to be using that are people like Amazon and then consumers. When that drone drops off that package, it may not even come from an Amazon facility, but the order came through Amazon. So how does that trigger then the payment to that supplier from that drop-off automatically? So that there's not a bunch of paperwork that has to follow. You just lost the whole reason to have the drone delivery in the first place. So smart contracts are a really important piece of this. And then trade between countries. So we're a coastal city, and we have a lot of trade that flows through here, through our Port of Portland and whatnot, and some of the companies here. And being able to do cross-border payments and save a ton of time is going to completely revolutionize supply chain people. But we're unique because we are so close to the port and so close to the banking community. We should be involved in that kind of. And you have to get a little deeper to be able to understand how that would work in order to change the culture of having paperwork and customs and have the delays of weeks sometimes in payments and have it be real time.
Mm-hmm. And then I know it's still very early days in the blockchain world, and so why is it important for PSU to get involved right now at the beginning?
Well, I think it's really critical because just like in analytics, there's also bias in analytics. And so if you're involved in the very front, you can be part of that community that decides and determines how's blockchain going to be used. And then how does that smart contract actually structured? Because if you come in later, it's already going to be there, and then all you can do is work within the boundaries of what's already established. This way you can be part of the forefront of designing it so that the community is better off and that we have the values of the people that don't have access to finance easily having that access and not building in the barriers that might actually take away what blockchain is really good at in the first place.
So, Cliff, we really want to thank you for coming in today and having this discussion. I think it's really important for our students to know exactly the direction we're going and why it's so important. So thank you for coming.
Absolutely. I think it's an incredibly important program. Thanks for helping put it together.
You're welcome. So Christy, Dean Allen brought up some really very interesting points. There's a big difference between what's currently available in existing blockchain programs and what we can offer here at PSU. First, most education is for software developers, and it's really focused around the technical aspects of blockchains and building blockchains from a computer science perspective. There are an increasing number of courses geared toward business professionals, but they're really limited to two things. Blockchain fundamentals, what are the components and the nuts and bolts of how blockchains work, and use cases. What specific use cases are being made of blockchains today?
I agree, Stan, and we'll cover those things in depth as well, but we go way beyond that. What other programs miss is really the when and the why. Business professionals need to know when blockchains can effectively be used and what categories of business problems that they can solve, and they also need to know what blockchains cannot do. Business professionals also need to know why companies should use blockchains, how they'll affect things like corporate strategy, operations, risk management, trading relationships, and competitive advantage. Our program goes into depth on all of these topics and provides models, frameworks, and real-world projects that'll prepare you for adding value to your organizations.
And then it's you, the students, that will be telling us, people coming from traditional perspectives, how blockchain will be used in the future for your particular business issues and industries. This is a really important and valuable role. Blockchain technology will fundamentally change the world we live in. It is very early in the development of these technologies. Values of early participants will literally be coded into these systems. So it's critical for professionals driving the development of these technologies to have the breadth and vision that will enable them to understand all of the potential consequences of these systems, both intended but also unintended, so they can build systems that have positive impacts for both the economy and the broader society.
We look forward to seeing you in our courses and traveling with you on this important journey.